What if the most complex building in the ancient Mediterranean world was not a fortress, not a temple, and not a tomb, but something that functioned as all three at once? 3,500 years before the present, a civilization on the island of Crete built a palace so intricate that later Greeks would transform its memory into a myth about a monster hidden at the center of an inescapable mass. Tonight, I am here with Rowan Hartsteele.
Good evening, Clara.
The question at the center of this episode is what kind of civilization builds a palace rather than a wall, and what that choice tells us about how power can be organized without conquest. Tonight, we turn to the Minoan civilization and its great center at Knossos, a place that administered an entire island economy through storage jars, painted walls, and undeciphered clay tablets. We ask what the walls of that palace still tell us about the people who lived inside them.
The Minoans left no deciphered, written language, no king list, no battle record. What they left were buildings, objects, and images, and those images speak in a voice entirely unlike anything else in the ancient world.
We are speaking about the Minoan civilization and the Palace of Knossos.
A civilization that flourished on Crete from roughly the 3rd millennium before the Common Era through the middle of the 2nd, and that produced the earliest complex urban society in European history.
Then let us begin with the geography that made Knossos possible.
Crete occupies a remarkable position in the eastern Mediterranean. It sits at the intersection of sea routes connecting the Greek mainland to the north, Egypt to the south, Anatolia to the east, and the central Mediterranean to the west. For any society with the means to build ships and the knowledge to navigate, Crete was not a remote island. It was a crossroads. From at least the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, the people of Crete were engaged in maritime trade with Egypt, the Levant, and the Aegean Islands. This connectivity allowed the accumulation of wealth in the form of metals, luxury goods, and agricultural surpluses, and it created the economic conditions under which complex administrative centers could emerge.
So prosperity came from movement, from being at the center of exchange, rather than from controlling territory.
Yes, and that distinction is crucial for understanding what the palaces were. Around 1900, before the Common Era, a series of large architectural complexes appeared at several sites across Crete, including Phaistos, Malea, and Zakros, as well as Knossos. These buildings were not simply residences for rulers. They functioned as integrated centers of administration, storage, craft production, and religious ceremony. Knossos was the largest of these complexes, covering an area of several thousand square meters and comprising hundreds of rooms arranged around a large central courtyard. At its height, the settlement surrounding the palace may have housed tens of thousands of people, making it one of the largest urban centers in the Bronze Age world.
So, Knossos was not simply a monument, it was a city in function.
Exactly. And the palace itself was the engine of that city. Its storerooms contained enormous ceramic containers, some taller than a person, filled with grain, olive oil, wine, and other agricultural goods. These goods were collected from the surrounding region, recorded on clay tablets, and redistributed according to a system that archaeologists have reconstructed in part through the physical evidence of the storage areas themselves. The clay tablets inscribed with the script known as linear provide further evidence of this administrative function. Linear has not been deciphered, but its structure suggests a record-keeping system tracking quantities, categories, and distributions of goods, similar in function to administrative records found in other palaces economies of the ancient Near East.
So there was bureaucracy, even if we cannot read the documents it left behind.
Yes, and this is one of the more striking aspects of Minoan civilization. We can identify the structure of a complex administrative system without being able to read the language in which it was recorded. The form is visible, even when the content remains closed. The political organization of Minoan society is a matter of ongoing scholarly debate. What the archaeological record does not show is the kind of monumental militaristic art that appears in contemporary Egypt or Mesopotamia. There are no battle scenes, no images of rulers triumphing over enemies, no fortification walls surrounding the palaces.
So the Minoans do not appear to have projected power through images of violence.
Not in the way that Egypt or Assyria did, no. This has led some scholars to describe Minoan society as relatively peaceful, though that interpretation must be held carefully. The absence of military imagery does not necessarily mean the absence of conflict. It may mean that authority was expressed and legitimated through different means, through religious ritual, through control of trade networks, through the display of wealth in architectural and artistic forms. Religion appears to have been central to the exercise of power at Knossos. The palace contained shrine rooms, sacred vessels, and symbolic objects, including double axes and bull horns that appear repeatedly in Minoan religious contexts. Peak sanctuaries located on hilltops around the island received offerings and served as sites of communal ritual that extended the religious authority of the palace into the wider landscape.
So the palace reached into the countryside not only through economics but through religion as well.
Yes, and figures such as the snake goddess, one of the most recognizable objects from Minoan culture, reflect the importance of female religious authority within this system. Whether the snake goddess represents a deity, a priestess, or both in one figure remains debated, but her presence in the archaeological record suggests that religious power at Knossos was not exclusively or even primarily masculine.
So the structure of authority at Knossos may have looked quite different from what we tend to assume about Bronze Age societies.
Yes, and this is where we need to address a significant complication. Much of what we think we know about Knossos is filtered through the interpretations of Arthur Evans, the British archaeologist who excavated the site beginning in 1900 and who oversaw an extensive program of reconstruction and analysis. Evans gave the civilization its name, chose which fragments to restore and how, and constructed the narrative of a peaceful, art-loving society, partly through the lens of his own early 20th century assumptions. His reconstructions are vivid, but they have been criticized by later archaeologists as going well beyond what the physical evidence supports.
So the palace we visit today is partly a modern interpretation built on ancient foundations.
Exactly. The restored columns, the painted walls, the reconstructed upper floors, these are informed reconstructions, not simply preservation. Visitors to Knossos today are experiencing both an archaeological site and an early 20th century interpretation of what that site might have looked like. That layering is itself part of the history. The palace was not built in a single phase. It went through multiple periods of construction, destruction, and rebuilding. The earliest palace structures date to around 1900 before the Common Era. These were severely damaged, probably by earthquake, around 1700 before the Common Era, and rebuilt on an even larger scale, in what archaeologists call the New Palace period.
So destruction was followed by an even more ambitious rebuilding.
Yes, the New Palace period, roughly from 1700 to 1450, before the Common Era, represents the height of Minoan power and the fullest expression of the architectural and artistic culture for which the Minoan civilization is known. This is when the great frescoes were painted, when the palace reached its maximum extent, and when Minoan influence in the Aegean was at its broadest. But here is where it shifts. Around 1450 before the Common Era, most of the palace sites on Crete were destroyed or abandoned. Knossos survived, but under changed conditions. The later tablets from Knossos are inscribed not in Linear A but in Linear B, which has been deciphered and identified as an early form of Greek. This suggests that by this period, Mycenaean Greeks from the mainland had taken control of the site.
So the end of Minoan dominance may not have been a single catastrophe, but a transition toward outside control.
The causes remain debated. The volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern Santorini, which occurred sometime in the 17th or 16th century, before the Common Era, likely caused significant disruption through tsunamis, ash fall, and the collapse of trade networks. Whether this event directly caused the Minoan decline, or simply weakened a system that Mycenaean expansion later overwhelmed, is not fully resolved. What is clear is that by 1300 before the Common Era, the distinctive Minoan palace culture had ended, and the island of Crete had been absorbed into the broader world of Mycenaean Greece. The palace of Knossos fell into disuse, and gradually accumulated the layers of debris and memory that would preserve it for the archaeologists of the 20th century.
And now we turn to what those walls contain, because the art of Knossos speaks in a way that the administrative record cannot.
The frescoes of Knossos are among the most remarkable works of art produced in the ancient world, and they are remarkable precisely because they are so unlike what one finds in the other great civilizations of the Bronze Age. Egyptian monumental art is hierarchical, frontal, and dominated by the image of the pharaoh. Mesopotamian art emphasizes the king in relation to the divine and the conquered. Minoan frescoes show something different. They are animated, curving, filled with movement and natural form. Dolphins leap through painted water, flowers and grasses bend in an implied wind. Human figures move with a fluidity that suggests the artist was interested in capturing a moment rather than encoding a fixed order.
So, the visual world of Knossos communicates something about values that the administrative record cannot tell us.
Yes, and the most discussed of these images is the bull leaping fresco. It shows a figure in the act of vaulting over a charging bull, hands on the animal's back, body extended horizontally in midair, while figures at either end of the bull appear to assist or receive the leaper. The image is dynamic in a way that few works of art from this period achieve.
So, bull leaping was real, not simply a mythological image.
The fresco, alongside other objects, including small figurines showing similar poses, strongly suggests that some form of bull-related performance was practiced. Whether the exact acrobatic movement shown in the fresco was physically possible has been tested by researchers with mixed conclusions, but the broader practice of ritual interaction with bulls was clearly central to Minoan religious and ceremonial life. The figures in the fresco include what appear to be both male and female participants, distinguished in the conventional Minoan way by skin color, with darker tones used for male figures and lighter for female. This convention, borrowed from Egyptian painting, suggests that Minoan art operated within a visual system with shared rules, even as it expressed a very different set of values.
So the art borrowed technique from neighbors while producing something entirely its own?
Exactly. Other frescoes from the palace extend this picture. The procession fresco shows a long line of figures moving in ceremonial dress, offering gifts. The figures, known as the Ladies in Blue, a group of women painted in profile with elaborate hairstyles and fine clothing, give a sense of courtly life and social distinction that goes beyond pure ritual. What these images collectively suggest is a society where the visual representation of community, of ceremony, and of natural abundance carried significant cultural weight. The absence of images of military power is not simply a gap. It points toward a set of choices about what was worth representing, and therefore worth valuing.
Though the art is itself a form of evidence about the priorities of the society that made it.
Yes, and the architecture reinforces this. The palace was built not for intimidation but for experience. Light wells cut vertically through the building bring natural light deep into interior spaces. Corridors open unexpectedly into courtyards. The arrangement of rooms creates a sequence of spaces that change in scale, light, and enclosure as one moves through them.
Before we close tonight, let us take a brief pause and welcome Margaret Evernight. Margaret, for those who want to understand how the Minoans built their world and what the palace at Knossos can still tell us, where would you invite them to continue?
Thank you, Clara. In this case, the most direct path is also the most important one. I would suggest beginning with the Minoans by Rodney Castledon.
So this is a comprehensive overview that covers both the archaeology and the mythology surrounding the civilization.
It is. Castledon examines the archaeological evidence from palace complexes such as Knossos, the artistic achievements of Minoan culture, and the economic systems that supported its development. He also considers the role of myth, including the story of the labyrinth and the Minotaur, and reflects on how modern discoveries and interpretations have shaped our understanding of this early European civilization.
And is this a text that a reader without prior knowledge of Bronze Age archaeology can approach?
It is accessible, yes. Castledon writes with care for the general reader, explaining technical concepts without assuming specialist knowledge. The book moves between the material evidence and the larger questions of interpretation in a way that rewards sustained reading rather than simply reference.
So reading it gives you both the facts of what was found and the framework for thinking about what those findings mean.
Yes, and it leaves the reader with a sense of how much remains open, which is itself an honest reflection of where the scholarship on Minoan civilization currently stands.
Thank you, Margaret. That is a thoughtful place to pause tonight.
Thank you, Clara. It was a pleasure.
The legacy of Knossos is inseparable from the myth that later Greek culture built upon its ruins. The story of the labyrinth, the monstrous Minotaur at its center, and the hero Theseus who navigated the maze with a thread given by the Cretan princess Ariadne is one of the most enduring narratives in Western mythology. The word labyrinth itself may derive from the Minoan term labris, a double axe that appears so frequently in Minoan religious contexts. If so, the house of the double axe, which is one possible translation, became in Greek memory the inescapable maze. The complexity of Knossos, its hundreds of rooms, its corridors, its unexpected turns, made a powerful impression on the people who encountered its remains in later centuries.
So the architecture of the palace generated its own mythology simply by being experienced as disorienting.
Exactly, and the bull, so central to Minoan visual culture and likely to Minoan ritual practice, became in the Greek retelling the terrifying creature at the center of the maze, fed on human sacrifice. The transformation is revealing what the Minoans appear to have engaged with as a source of sacred power and ritual performance, later Greeks recast as a source of horror, requiring heroic conquest. This mythological reworking tells us something important about how cultures process the memory of civilizations they have displaced or inherited. The Mycenaean Greeks who took control of Crete around 1450 before the Common Era did not simply erase Minoan culture. They absorbed it, adapted it, and eventually transformed it into something that fitted their own values and their own need for origin stories.
So Minoan civilization did not simply end. It was translated into a different cultural form.
Yes, Minoan artistic conventions, religious symbols, and craft traditions continued to influence Mycenaean culture for generations after the palace period ended. The frescoes, the ceramic styles, the iconography of the bull and the double axe. These moved into the wider Aegean world and contributed to what would eventually become classical Greek culture. The rediscovery of Knossos by Arthur Evans beginning in 1900 reintroduced Minoan civilization to the modern world, at a moment when archaeology was becoming a public cultural event. Evans' reconstructions were controversial among specialists from an early point, but they captured the imagination of a wider audience in a way that more cautious scholarship rarely does.
So Evans gave the public a version of Knossos they could see and enter, even if that version contained his own assumptions.
Yes, and that tension between accessibility and accuracy has defined the reception of Knossos ever since. The site continues to attract millions of visitors, the reconstructions remain in place, and scholars continue to debate how much of what stands at Knossos today reflects the Bronze Age and how much reflects the early 20th century. The broader significance of Minoan civilization for the history of Europe is considerable. Knossos is often described as the first city in European history, and the palace economy it developed represents the earliest example on European soil of the kind of complex administrative and economic organization that would later define Greek city-states and, through them, the political traditions of the Western world.
So Minoan civilization sits at the root of a very long chain.
Yes, and what makes it particularly valuable as a case study is that it demonstrates a path to complexity that does not run through militarism. The Minoan palace economy was built on trade, on redistribution, on religious authority, and on the cultivation of an extraordinarily rich visual culture. Whether or not this accurately describes a peaceful society, it describes a society that found ways to organize power that do not fit the standard models. The questions the Minoans leave open are as important as the answers they provide. We do not know what language they spoke at full complexity. We do not know the precise structure of their political authority. We do not know with certainty what ended them. And yet the walls of Knossos, painted with dolphins and bull leapers and women in blue, continue to communicate something recognizable across 3,500 years.
So what remains speaks, even when we cannot fully translate it.
Yes, and perhaps the most honest thing we can say about the Minoans is that they were genuinely other, a civilization organized around values and practices that we can partially reconstruct but never fully inhabit. That distance is not a failure of archaeology. It is a reminder of how varied the human capacity for building complex societies has been. In a present moment when questions about how power is organized, how wealth is distributed, and how a society chooses to represent itself visually are as pressing as they have ever been, the Palace of Knossos offers not answers but a different set of questions asked from a very great distance.
Thank you for staying with us tonight. And thank you, Rowan, for guiding us through the palace, the frescoes, and the long questions that the Minoan civilization continues to leave unanswered.
A civilization that left no readable history still managed to say something about what it valued. And what it valued was movement, color, the natural world, and the complexity of a building that no one who entered it could fully hold in mind at once.
If this conversation stayed with you, you are welcome to like, comment, and subscribe. You will find other episodes here where history, ideas, and power are approached slowly. Until next time, stay with us.